knowledge about that reality with scientific method, and that knowledge will be very accurate and objective. And as we improve our methodology, we will be able to get more and more accurate and objective knowledge out there. So, on the other hand, constructionism is about relativity of knowledge, is about phenomenology in ontology and interpretivism in epistemology. So the existence does not exist outside our mind. Therefore, the understanding about that existence is interpretivist knowledge or understanding of perception. So it is about not taking for granted the knowledge of a given reality, because we would believe that every knowledge we have, everything that we are certain about, is just a taken for granted knowledge, and it's just an interpretation. Mine or other person, they just passed it to me. So we should be very critical about what we have taken for granted as knowledge. So regarding constructionism, we don't discover the reality, because there is no reality outside the world to be discovered. We create the reality. So we have two types of knowledge: discovering reality knowledge and creating reality knowledge. So regarding constructionism, which is the focus of this study, we can say that there are two components of social construction. First, socially influenced conceptual construction of the world, and second, socially influenced practical construction of the world. Constructionism is not just based on conceptual knowledge. It is also about practical knowledge as well. So we can say that there are two sets of characters for constructionism. The constructionist knowledge is an evolving knowledge. It's relative, it's practical, and it's actor-based. And the second set is related to the first set. So it says that we will have multiple realities. It is reasonable, it is predictable. Those are good qualities of any knowledge, and it's not inevitable. There might be different types of knowledge as reasonable, as predictable as this one. So everything I know might be practical, might be reasonable, might be predictable, but there are multiple realities. So my knowledge, my understanding, my interpretation is not inevitable. But in positivism, the knowledge we discover, because it comes from some methodological stages, and also they believe in reality and objective knowledge, that is certain knowledge, that's inevitable. When you know something, you know it. There is no way you can reject the fact. They are looking for facts. But in constructionism, they don't suggest that there is inevitable knowledge. So now let's look at the some of the aspects, main features of Baha'i theology, and see if we can fit them into constructionist approach. Before we go there, as you can see, in constructionism, conceptual part and practical part should be in a balance. Constructionism doesn't believe only in conceptual knowledge. They also want the knowledge to be practical, to be helpful, to work. So, a sociological interpretation of Baha'i theology. I don't know if it is actually sociological interpretation, but it is definitely based on philosophy of social science. So let's say it's a social scientific interpretation of Baha'i theology. So constructionism to be constructionism, it needs ontologically phenomenological reality, epistemologically interpretive knowledge. So first, we focus on phenomenological realities, the realities that are not out there, or if they are out there, they are out of our reach. So let's see, what do we have here? Baha'is believe that there are three realms of existence: the word of God, the word of the kingdom, and the word of creation. God is regarded as the real existence and pure unity, and manifests his absolute being to the realm of kingdom, which is which is also the realm of attributes. The word of the kingdom, as the first creation of God, is reflected in the reality of the creatures. It can be very similar to the light that spreads out from the sun to the creatures. This light is reflected in endless appearances in the reality of the creatures, and identifies and personalizes itself along with the potentiality and the essential merit of things. Therefore, according to the Baha'i point of view, the first creation is manifested through the mirror of the realm of the kingdom, and then through the word of the kingdom, the realm of the kingdom, and then through the realm of the kingdom, resulting in the emanation and attribution to all creatures. And the creatures are his radiance of existence reflected through the mirror of the world of manifestation. There is absolutely no other relationship between him and his creatures. The Sun of Truth does not come down to the word of creatures. It shines its glory towards them through the reflecting word of the kingdom. The pure unity reflects himself into the infinite forms of creatures through the mirror of the kingdom. Therefore, in terms of existence, the creatures are from the one essence of the real and pure existence. Alternatively, in terms of the different and various features of the creatures, the kingdom reflects all the attributes to the word of creatures. Each creature receives its portion of these attributions in accordance with its capacity and merits. Among all the creatures, humans have the most capacity and therefore reflect the most radiant of attributions such as knowledge, mercy, wisdom, creativity, glory, and power. Therefore, God is unknowable, unknown, and because he does not have any attribution through which he could be known, and while humans cannot know the absolute being through their cognitive means, they can merely be aware of attributes and characters, which is the realm of manifestation of God. Therefore, consequently, Baha'i beliefs and ideas can be regarded as a transcendental doctrine, both ontologically, which we here saw, and epistemologically, which we are going to see later. So Baha'i ontology is shaped by the concept of manifestation, reflection, emanation, and you can see that the only nomen out there is God. And God is unknowable, unknown, is the pure being. And pure being without any attribution is out of our mind sight. Our mind cannot understand it. We just accept that God exists because we have been, or we are told that we have been existent because of the reflection of his radiant, pure being. Other than that, we know nothing about him. We don't even know anything about our existence. We cannot know being. Our mind cannot understand being. Our mind can understand attributes and characters, which is about the realm of manifestation, not about the realm of God. The realm of God is absolute being, no attribution whatsoever. So there is no way we can understand God. We only can understand attributions. We only can understand characters. So that's the realm of manifestation of God that we can understand. Well, if we can call it understanding, it's very relative still. It's also ongoing. It's also incomplete, but it's in some way almost possible for us, or we are at least allowed to think about it. So the other part of constructionism, as we mentioned, I hope that we have established that ontologically we have phenomenon in the Baha'i faith to study manifestation of God and all the creatures. God, the only nomen, is out of reach. So we have phenomenology in terms of ontology. And let's see what kind of knowledge we can have. What is the features of our epistemology regarding Baha'i writings, or my understandings at least of Baha'i writings. In the Book of Certitude, Baha'u'llah explains that previous scriptures should be interpreted by people to be fully understood. However, people were not aware of the fact that the scriptures were ontologically phenomena. They are mainly metaphors and implications. And even when people realize, or sometimes when they realize the fact that they have to interpret God's words, they didn't know how, and they also referred to the wrong interpreters and people for help. According to Baha'u'llah, the best way the believers should understand the divine reality is by pure heart of themselves and themselves only. They have their own understandings and their own cognitive means and tools, which is mind, which is heart, which is reason, and theirs only. They shouldn't follow anyone. They shouldn't copy anyone. And so Baha'u'llah in Kitab al-Iman, in the Book of Certitude, it is all about interpretation of the Word of God in Quran, in Bible, and Baha'u'llah himself interprets some of the key terms and concepts such as life, resurrection, judgment, and the signs of the promised one, and left the rest of the writings to the capable hands of his followers to follow, to interpret them for themselves and not follow anybody else in this regard. So I think it is pretty clear that regarding epistemology, we are related on interpretivism. So now it's time for us to move on to the highlights of Baha'i theology. Let's see what are the features and highlights of Baha'i theology. And for this part, I have used some of the scholars' ideas and opinions, Baha'i scholars' ideas and opinions, specifically Paul Lampel and William Hatcher in this regard. Paul Lampel argues that the pluralism of Baha'i theology is, on the one hand, its advantage and on the other is based on the weakness of human in understanding the meanings and implications of the holy writings. Baha'is cannot, however, compensate for this weakness by ignoring or declining it. By absolutism and monopolization, this weakness is not going to heal. I think it was ignoring and denying it. I think that was a typo here in my writing. So, in contrast, through discussion, consultation, and toleration, Baha'is can get a more comprehensive, broad insight into the Baha'i writings. Furthermore, the outcome of the consultation and discussion should be tested in the empirical field of interaction between people and society. Plus, they have to be ready to change their points of view when necessary. Paul Lampo stresses that under this condition, and only under this condition, they are allowed to talk about progressive theology among Baha'is. Baha'u'llah says, therefore, no absolute knowledge of the cosmos being available to man. All descriptions, all schemata, all attempts to portray the metaphysical basis of the universe are necessarily limited by the viewpoint of the particular person making them. They are limited relative truths only. Diverses of description are while true, but a children's truth. So here we can see the relative nature of our knowledge about universe, about everything, basically, about the everything that we want to understand and describe to others. We can see only from our perspective, as Abdul Baha explains. Abdul Baha suggests different perspectives lead to different way of interpretation and opinions. As long as the stands are inevitably different, the understandings and opinions will be different either. The reality for each person is not the absolute truth. It is dependent on their perspective. The only reality that can be attained by people is a relative reality. This relativity is not the feature of the truth, but it is the nature of human cognition. We cannot dominate all the reality or the truth. We cannot have all the truth at the same time, or never, for that matters. But we have only our own perspective, and we can see the world from our own perspective and understand that from our own viewpoint. So that's the only reality, and that's the only truth we can get. Another feature, William Hatcher expresses that Baha'i theology is an apophatic theology that comes from believing in an unknowable, unknown God. He suggests Baha'i theology is a practical theology of service rather than abstract arguments. He suggests Baha'i theology is the theology of manifestation and relativism. Then we get to the last feature that I have listed from Baha'i theology. Baha'is, directed by the scriptures and the universal house of justice, participate in an ongoing endeavor as they seek truth and strive to translate that which has been written into reality and action. These are Paul Lampo's opinions. This endeavor integrates a diversity of actions in localities throughout the world. From a wide range of explorations, some prove to be effective, and these can be adopted by an increasing number of communities, allowing them to chart their perceptions step by step. The rate of progress depends upon the degree to which the individuals, institutions, and communities understand, internalize, and act upon Baha'u'llah's teaching. So now we can discuss what we have learned. We can put together everything and see how Baha'i theology may or may not work. So far we learned, or at least I learned, Baha'is read their scriptures, interpret them by themselves, practice them in community building activities or in other everyday life experiences they have, reflect on them, and practice their renewed interpretation. And this circle goes on and on. It's an ongoing learning process through Baha'is reading the text, perception, practice, reflection, read again, interpret again, correct their reflection, change their reflection, their interpretation, and practice it again and again and again. So Baha'i theology is not about reading and understanding the Baha'i scriptures only. And it requires experiencing those writings. Some elements influence the experience and from there influence Baha'i theology, such as time, place, knowledge, the background of the people who are practicing and interpreting and understanding those concepts and those texts. So these variations can change the construction of theology. Therefore, Baha'is must constantly renew their theology. Baha'i theology is not exclusively what they have to learn through their scriptures. It is what they are learning and producing during their interactions, conversations, and other experiences, both individually and collectively. And now I want to call this Baha'i theology an experimental and empirical theology. I believe this term can explain the procedure of the construction as well as its features. So, as a conclusion, let's answer to those research questions we mentioned in the beginning. Is Baha'i classic theology possible? I'm sure you know my answer. I don't know your answer, but I'm sure that so far you know my answer. No. Baha'i theology is not supposed to emerge through exclusively scholar activities. So it's different from a classic theology. What are the key features of the Baha'i theology? You know them: pluralism, relativism, apophatic, pragmatic. How can Baha'i theology become possible? I would suggest Baha'i theology is not only about reading and understanding the Baha'i scripture. It requires experiencing those writings. This theology can be identified as an empirical and experimental theology. Thanks for your patience. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Oops. Thank you so much. So we have room now for questions for all of you who have watched today. Please, we want your questions because this was a subject that you can, through your questions, help others understand that if there was an area where you didn't understand, maybe someone else will. So there is a question about this nature of the strength in plurality. And you mentioned that it also may double as a weakness. Could you elaborate on this plurality of people's opinions and what they can surmise about the same concept?
Yes, as I said, Paul Lampe believes that plurality is an advantage because everyone gets to have their own opinions, their own thoughts, and if they clearly formulate them, they can even talk about it, publish it, or anything. So it is a good thing because everyone can be involved and participate in construction of this theology. But we have this plurality, and not because reality is plural. The only reality that we believe in, the only essential reality, is the pure, absolute unity, absolute oneness, which is God. But it is because of our cognition that we have pluralism in Baha'i theology, because we only get to know the word from our own perspective. And my perspective is different from yours. Yours is different from Jeremiah's and everyone else's. I can see my friend Ismail here. Ismail's viewpoint is different from others. So we have different viewpoints, and we cannot see the word outside our viewpoints. We only see the word from our own viewpoint and our own viewpoint only. So it's like we are sitting around a table, and there is an object in the middle, in the center of the table, and we look at this object, and we see different aspects, different side of that. So we describe it in different ways. That's no way we could know all aspects while we are sitting on our own seats. You know, the story of these Indians in the dark room with an elephant, and they couldn't understand and see the entire elephant as a whole. So everyone could only touch a part of elephant, and they have described it in a different way. So this pluralism is a good thing because we are allowed and we can participate in construction of our own theology. It's not dictated to us, but it's also not based on some different realities out there. It is based on our limited cognition side.
Thank you so much for that. That definitely makes a lot of sense given the nature of all of our different perspectives. Now, there is another question as it relates to the fundamental difference of Baha'i theology to regular theology. So you earlier in the presentation, and we have a lot of people who have joined us later in the presentation, and they, by virtue of not having listened to the beginning of your talk, a lot of people have joined us now, they have missed out on a very important distinction of how you, through the Baha'i definition, have defined theology and what it is not. If you could please re-elaborate that concept, because it is a very important takeaway, so that we don't confuse Baha'i theology with what is the normal conceived definition of theology.
Yes. The classic theology of previous religions were basically formulated by the scholars and by normally clergy who also were theologians, or theologians who also were clergy. So they were allowed and they were responsible to formulate their theology, and whatever they formulated was dictated to other people. So other people, neither they had they the knowledge or the time or the authority to formulate theology for their own. But today, and also at the time, we know all the I see everything sociological, all the social problems of clergies in previous dispensations, as the Universal House of Justice referred to. As the House said, the theologians considered theology in their province, in their domination, in their possession, and they didn't allow anybody else to think for themselves. They forced others to believe whatever they understood from the faith or from the scriptures. And so that's the problems from the previous. So that's why ever since 1980s, the Universal House of Justice is very concerned about the usage of the term Baha'i theology, how we use it, the conditions that we can or cannot use it, and the concerns that come from the risks of using this concept. So in this regard, we came to this question. Okay, so now that we are not allowed to have clergies, we don't have clergies, obviously, we are not allowed to have theologians who exclusively possess the authority of producing theology among themselves. And so what is the case here? What the question is it possible even to have the classic Baha'i theology at all? Which my answer was no to, because classic theology was created among the scholars and scholars only, and it was formulated only in a conceptual way. And also the attribution of this Baha'i theology is relative, it is apophatic, it is pragmatic. So it should be helpful, it should be useful, and it should be created among people through their everyday life, through their interaction with each other, and reading the scriptures, their perception about the scriptures, taking them into practice, and then see if they work. See, not the scriptures work, their perception, their understanding, their interpretation of the scriptures work. If it doesn't work, they should change it. They should be ready to change their view. They should be ready and prepared to change their understandings and interpretations of the scriptures if it's not helpful, if it's not working. And I think basically that was the entire presentation.
Thank you so much for that, because it's important to remind people who are here that the House of Justice has definitely, the Universal House of Justice, the governing body for the Baha'is of the world, has put in very clear guidance as to how we can move forward in the realm of theology. And as Dr. Merghani mentioned, there are, even as a result of the maturity of the Baha'i community, restraints that have been put in place for the purpose of not overstepping where we ourselves are yet unprepared for. And that I thought was very important you brought it up. It's something that I don't think, if people didn't listen to your talk today, they would have maybe even contemplated. So it's very important that you mentioned these things. Thank you. There are some questions that have been posed. Another question is, this is from one of the Baha'is in Clearwater. Is the variability of interpretation of the law itself is in question, or applicability of the law based on the individual's opinion?
The law, you mean?
So no is the answer.
I didn't quite understand your question, sorry.
Sorry, I'm reading off the text as well. So the question again is the variability of the interpretation of the law itself, is that in question, or is the applicability of the law based on the individual's opinion?
Well, it's in a short answer, I would say no. It's but it's more complicated than theology, because law is something that you will practice. and there are some, some consequences if you break a law. So I would say there are some individual laws and rules and teachings that it's you and your God, between you and your God. I believe, yes, that can be left to the interpretation of an individual. But when it comes to the society and applying them in the society, then it requires the guidance of the Universal House of Justice, and I believe that's the reason we have the Universal House of Justice, to guide us through the requirements of time and places, how to practice the faith, how to establish the law, how to follow their law and not break them, and things like that. What happens if we do?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that has answered your question. The person who's messaged privately from Clearwater, I hope that has answered your question. Now, there is something from Miss Regina Colston. I don't see the message, but Jeremiah is letting me know that there is one.
John, is it okay if I make a comment and explain my question or whatever?
Yeah, it's fine.
Dr. Mergani, thank you. I really appreciate your presentation. I was looking at your model with the scriptures at the center, and on the outer, read, reflection, practice, interpretation. We are very early in the development of the faith. It just makes so much sense to stay in your lane, because once you get to that point of interpretation individually, and we are unable to understand that realm, you eliminate the development of sects and divisions, and it puts the sovereignty, maybe the wrong word, within the Universal House of Justice, which is spiritually empowered to make these critical decisions. And if we as human Baha'is focus on your model, we gradually evolve to a higher human state, developing our spiritual capacity, because we're supposed to be out there doing the work. So thank you for eliminating wasting time on what we think we can do. Just follow the principles of the faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe also in your talk, you spoke about this experiential portion of Baha'i theology, that in the Baha'i concept, you have to experience the writings and not just read them. So that would in itself imply not just experiencing the rationalization of certain concepts, but also implementing the Baha'i law as well.
Yes, it can be. Yes, we can practically see how they work and experience them in an empirical field. But we also, yeah, in terms of law, I believe it falls in different areas. It is also, of course, everything we said about human cognition and everything we said about reality is also true about law as well as theology. But regarding the law, because it requires the social order, and it's a matter of punishment or rewarding people for following the law or breaking the law. So it's in a different area, which is not my area. And I hope that somebody someday who has studied law can explain that for us as well, and how law can or cannot be socially constructed among Baha'is. I still believe it can, but in a very complicated, different way, which is not that easy. And I cannot explain that because law is not my field.
Thank you so much for speaking on this subject. And again, with regards to the question that was posed, I have to say, I have to be very clear. This is not my biased question, even though I do care about laws and legal stuff myself. This was a question from someone else. I want to be very clear. This is not my question.
No, that's all right. That is a very valid question. That's a really valid question. But unfortunately, I'm not the one who can answer that question.
Yes.
I can say everything I said about ontology and epistemology, relativity, and everything else. It can be applied to law as well, but it is different in terms of practicing law. It's different from practicing theology and different things. And I think, and I believe that the Baha'i community is too young now, as I think Regina also mentioned, too young now to fully understand the situation or the legal and law related situations in the Baha'i community. But yeah, we need to wait, and we can talk about it, we can discuss about it, and it's a very valid question. I think a more knowledgeable person plus a more experienced Baha'i community can answer that question.
So I wanted to ask you, this is my question now.
Okay.
This is my question.
All right.
So this is a question that I think that the audience can also glean from, something very important from someone like yourself. Can you, in a simple way, because of course we can all look it up, but in a simple way, could you explain epistemology and how epistemology is different in the Baha'i viewpoint?
Epistemology is a branch of philosophy that is concerned about knowledge, human knowledge, its limitation, its type, what can we know, what we cannot know, and how far and how much we can know, how certain we can or cannot be. Is it then if our knowledge is an absolute, objective, unbiased knowledge, or our knowledge is uncertain, relative knowledge? And
so could a mnemonic be, how do you know what you know?
Yes, exactly. How do you know what you know? Yes, exactly. Very precise. Thank you very much for helping me out here.
Sure.
Yes. So, in my opinion, according to Baha'i writings, in my personal opinion, and 1,000 times only in my personal opinion, the epistemology is the interpretive epistemology in Baha'i faith. Everything that is related to the scriptures is a matter of interpretation and our perception, our individual perception and understanding, as also Baha'u'llah mentioned that, also philosophy agrees with that as well. So there are layers of understanding, and there are layers of being. So for example, there is scriptures, a set of scriptures. It's out there. So let's say Book of Certitude, Kitab Aqdas. It's out there. It is objective reality. But when I read that scriptures, I understand the word by word of Kitab Aqdas by my personal background, my knowledge. So for example, I know Arabic. I am a Persian. I have from the culture that this kind of things were usual or still are usual in them. So my perspective, my understanding is different from a person who probably doesn't know Arabic and he or she has to study Kitab Aqdas from the English translation of it. So they might they definitely understand them, these scriptures in different ways. So when we put them together, when we put our understandings together, because they have different viewpoints that I don't, and I have different viewpoints that they don't, if we consult, if we discuss, if we share with thoughts, our thoughts and opinions with each other, then we can have a bigger picture, a more completed picture, like a puzzle. Every one of us has a piece of that puzzle. We can never complete that puzzle, but we can complete it in an ongoing process. So every time we put a piece in that puzzle and see different picture, sometimes it is correct. Sometimes we realize, oh no, this piece wasn't right for this part. So we change the piece. So we see the word in a different way. So that's interpretivism, relativism, and an ongoing learning process of epistemology and of knowledge, of creating knowledge and understanding. So we create knowledge of the scriptures. We create our knowledge of Baha'i theology. We don't discover them.
That is very unique, very interesting. And again, the concept of being able to arrive through independent investigation to these realizations and understandings, and on the basis of this rationalization, yet this empiricism as well, to be able to arrive commonly to a similar understanding. It's a very unique perspective, historically, especially.
Yes, for example, in Iran, my country, they do something, and so some people say, why Islam says this, or why Islam says that, and they say, no, this is not Islam. This is what people do. It's not Islam. It's Islam says good things. This is people's doing. And when they say, okay, so what is Islam? They say very abstract things that's not applicable for this day. But in the Baha'i faith, I suggest 100% only my personal opinion. I have no authority to ask you to believe whatever I may change tomorrow, my opinions. But in Baha'i faith, I believe that our action and our perceptions are a matter of understanding what Baha'i faith says. Some person can study the Baha'i scriptures and also see our actions. And they have to know that our actions is based on our today's understanding of the scriptures. Of course, we improve. Of course, we learn more. Of course, we gain more knowledge 2 years from now. Of course, we change our actions or our understandings or everything else. So yeah, this is an ongoing process.
You've actually stimulated the question. You made me think of this quote, and I'm paraphrasing because it's from Baha'u'llah, but it's not a quote that I just readily have handy on me. I didn't know we'd get here today, or I would have prepared this. There is a quote that the righteous deeds are sins to the near ones. Have you heard of that one? There's a direct quote from Baha'u'llah speaking of the relativity of the deeds that we do, that again, if you do something that's technically considered within the law now, it could still be considered a sin to those who are near unto God.
Yes, yes.
So there's an example we have where Abdul Baha frowns very highly upon smoking. You're allowed to smoke as a Baha'i, but again, it's very heavily frowned upon, and strong language is used towards it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Hasanatul Abrar, Sayyatul Muqarrabin. That's the Arabic version of it, which means what is good deed for good people. It's like a sin for even the better people, something like that.
Yes, and it's this concept, as you've just mentioned, and I respect very, very much so. Like it's your opinion, you said it as such. I do think, though, that there is from the writings very clear guidance as to this questioning of self and this self-reflection every single day. Hence the quote, take thyself to account each day ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. It's this concept of being true to who you are in a actual sense, not just everyone accepting you for what you are, but you being true to who you are in your self-betterment process, and understanding that you have to be honest to yourself that if you thought of a better way to do it, you should do that.
Yes, exactly. And maybe tomorrow you know better than today. So
Yes.
today you do something, something that tomorrow you may realize, oh, it wasn't a good deed. It was even a bad deed. It was even a sin. But yesterday I didn't know better. I did whatever I could do. And no one can does more than that. And God accepts, or Baha'u'llah accepts that. No, Baha'u'llah doesn't force people what they can't bear.
And this is in so much guidance from the Universal House of Justice, where they leave things even as a matter of law. And I'm a lawyer, so I do care about that area. But in terms of every single strata of Baha'i thought, where the House of Justice, they or the National Assembly, they leave things to our opinion, to how we feel we can best implement the writings. It really is in this realm of thought, if you're being true to your understanding of the Baha'i writings. And it's very intriguing. Like, for example, the concept of vaccines has come up, and the National Assembly of the United States has messaged all of us about it, that no, you cannot use the religious exemption to not have a vaccine. That, of course, in that realm, the Baha'i faith is not going to tell you that you have a protection from taking vaccines. But on the other end, it says very much telling you to be wise about it, that if there is a government law that says you have to get a vaccine, well, you have to obey the laws of your government. And it's very intriguing, because when you see this understanding, the House of Justice has made multiple calls. For example, I imagine that ethics, biomedical ethics, has been something that has come to mind multiple times. And there is a subject we had in a social and economic developments conference here in Orlando. A doctor who had gone into what the House of Justice has said on the subject went in and was looking at, for example, the very famous thoughts now about assisted suicide versus painless death and so forth, and how people interpret these things versus what the writings say on them, and how the House of Justice has left it up, like you mentioned, to our judgment to interpret at this time, until they decide in the future, at this time, what we are to do for ourselves. But it has to be based on this truthfulness.
Thank you. Whenever you present the social construction of Baha'i law or something like that, please invite me too.
I have to tell you that is a very that is a very, very tough subject. I don't think that one, at least not now, my personal opinion, I don't think that one could really encapsulate it in a short talk, because I think it will, I mean, if the House of Justice themselves has left things to our reasoning, to our reflection, I don't think there is, or at least now at our level of maturity, there will be, as of yet, an opportunity or a wise time to do such a thing.
I agree with that. Yes.
So I will very happily leave that to some of the brave people of the future. But nonetheless, it was amazing to have you today to speak on this very, very important subject. And for those of you who've joined us on Facebook and YouTube, we are happy you were able to join us. We apologize for starting this on live stream during the talk, but we will have no doubts. We will be posting the full version of this talk shortly. Jeremiah here has to just upload the videos. So that being said, again, thank you for all of you being patient with us online today for the delay in posting this video. But nonetheless, Doctor, do you have any final thoughts you would like to mention to everyone?
No, just thank you for inviting me and letting me to share my thoughts and opinions with you. And we're very patient during the presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As you've been very patient today as well. So I want to say thank you so much for your beautiful talk. We hope that you can have a follow-up to this. If you are willing to, again, return, we would love to have you.
Hopefully. Inshallah.
We hope you all have a beautiful Sunday. Thank you all for joining. And please send your questions to clearwaterbaha'is.org, and we will connect you where you ask us the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys. Bye, everyone.